Why is it that every time I decide to sit down and film a video, Billboard's like, oh, perfect time to play with my ball? Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I have got my hoodie on, super comfy. I've just finished work and I thought I'd jump on and finally film this video. So this is just going to be super chilled out and relaxed, so feel free to drink some tea while we spill some tea. If you saw on my Instagram story or if you follow me on Twitter, then you probably saw that I asked you for your unpopular bookish opinions. So I asked for sort of bookish confessions, bookish thoughts and opinions that were quite unpopular. I thought it'd be quite fun to pop them all in a video and share them, and I'll tell you my thoughts on these, and you can comment down below if you agree, if you disagree, if you think, oh my god, what's that person thinking, or if you're like, I absolutely agree with that. And I'm going to keep everything anonymous. So I thought that if I'm gonna read other people's confessions out to you, then I should probably be honest and tell you some of my confessions. So I've been trying to think of a few that I could share, and I've got one confession and then one sort of like unpopular opinion, so to speak. So I'll go with the bookish confession first. The bookish oh god, do I share this? I shared it on my story, but obviously I feel like more people are gonna see this, and now I'm like, I feel exposed, like physically saying it out loud. My bookish confession has got to do with Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo is a very famous author. I think she's written a lot of YA. I think this is adult, but the other series that she's done is YA. I know that she's a very well loved, very popular author. Can't really comment on any of her work because I've never read it. Because I've never read it, I've heard about her being talked about in the bookish community. Ever since I've heard of Leigh Bardugo, oh my god, this sounds so stupid to say. Every time I heard of Leigh Bardugo, I assumed that she was a man. Please don't hate me. I just never looked into her books. I'd never really heard about any of the plots. I'd never seen her do any interviews. I'd never seen like any of her social media. But for some reason, I just had in my head that Leigh Bardugo was male. When this book came out and they were like, it's a female author, I was like, oh, kind of makes sense now. So yeah, that's a bit embarrassing. My sort of unpopular bookish opinion, which I don't think the majority of you are going to agree with, because I know that this particular trope in romance, I say romance, but it goes across, you can see it in fantasy, you see it a lot in sci-fi, is everywhere and people lap it up. But when I tell you I really don't like it, like I'm not joking. I really dislike, and I know you're probably going to come for me for saying this, enemies to lovers. Like, I don't understand it. I don't understand why people find it interesting. Like, to me it's just annoying. And I know you're probably thinking, but Ash, I'm sure you've said that you really like the Cruel Prince series, so why do you like Folk of the Air if you don't like enemies to lovers? And I get that. For me, if it isn't enemies to lovers and they really are enemies, you know, when the families hate each other and is like a forbidden romance, then I kind of get it. Or if the characters like really do hate each other and then over a long period of time they end up falling in love, like I don't mind that so much. In a lot of books, the characters have got no real reason to hate each other. They just sort of dislike each other, or like they're annoyed by each other, but the only reason they dislike each other is because they've got feelings and they don't want to admit it. And like for me, that's just something that I personally don't enjoy, because I'm like, oh, we all know that you're going to get together, so why don't you just get together and stop pretending to hate each other? But there's other tropes within romance, or like the romantic relationships within a book, that I prefer a lot more. We all can't like the same sort of tropes or books. The world would be very boring if we all did. So with my embarrassing confessions and unpopular opinions out of the way, let's dive into yours. So the first one, and like I said, I'm going to keep this all anonymous. This one might be controversial, like I can't comment it on myself because I've not read this book, but it says, and I think I'm pronouncing this right, Eleanor Orpheant is completely fine, was shite. And then it's got 3 laughing faces, and then in brackets, people are gonna hate me. I can't comment on this book because I've not read it, but what I will say is that it's one that's been recommended to me quite a lot. But for me, sometimes when a book is really overhyped, it kind of pisses me off a little bit, and I'm like, oh, is it really as good as it says that it's going to be? And I mean, when you look at things like 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, for example, I was put off reading that for a long time because so many people were talking about it, and I was like, oh my god, I'm going to be the only one that hates it. But I really loved that book, so you know, I might like Eleanor Orpheant is completely fine. So the second one, and I've got to say, I do agree with this. Harry Potter is underrated. I do think Harry Potter is overrated. In my personal opinion, I do feel like the story itself is good, but when you really like deep it, it's not like the most amazing thing that's ever been written. When you look at the spells, they are just, so like Lumos and Nox, they are just the Latin, think it's Latin, names for like light on and light off. And then the Philosopher's Stone it's always been a thing, like she didn't make up the Philosopher's Stone. And then when you look at like the Dementors and then you compare it to Lord of the Rings, you can see a lot of the similarities with everything that J.K. Rowling has come out and said over the last couple of years, and like even longer than that when you really think about it. At 26 now, I can really see the things that she's done that are not necessarily great. I think when you're reading something as a teenager or as a child, like sometimes you don't have the full understanding of what somebody's actually like. Things that she said, you know, about the trans issues is something I can't ignore, and it is something I can't support. The things that she said about people that are autistic, she said too many harmful things, and she's just outcast so many people who have loved her books for so many years. And I know you can argue that you can separate artist from art, but for me, she's still saying transphobic rhetoric. She's just a TERF, and it's not something I can support. That's my opinions on J.K. Rowling anyway, and yes, I do agree that I think that she's overrated. Let's look at the next one, and this says, love triangles need to die. And I'm doing this face because I'm really close to the person who said this. I know that this has wounded me because love triangles are my favourite tropes. I love me a good love triangle. I mean, you shove a love triangle into a story, the writing doesn't need to be perfect, the characters don't need to be the best characters I've ever read, the plot doesn't need to be amazing, but the likelihood is I'm probably going to give it 5 stars because I am a sucker for a love triangle. So no, I don't think personally that love triangles need to die. I can see why a lot of people don't like them, because obviously it's sort of choosing one or the other. Could you argue that like it's technically cheating? I suppose it depends on the take of it. It depends if one character is with the other character already, and there always tends to be like one character you prefer over the other. But I think that's what I like about it. Like look at Twilight, for instance, you know, like the whole like Edward Jacob thing. I know like a lot of people hated it, but I loved it because I was like, I know she's going to end up with Edward, but like, does Jacob stand a chance? Like, I feel like, you know, if Taylor Lautner was coming on to me, I'd be like, yes, please, good sir. And if you had both of them wanting your attention, I mean, is that necessarily a bad thing? Am I just being thirsty? Probably. I don't think love triangles are overrated, but I can totally see why you would think that. Then the next one says, most romance, and then in brackets, at least in the books I've read, in brackets, are awkward, forced and unnatural. And this is really interesting because I suppose it depends what type of books you read. It depends on your thoughts and your opinions on romance in general. Like if you're somebody who loves romance books, then you're probably not going to find it unnatural or like awkward and forced. But I do agree, and there's certain situations where it does feel forced, and it does feel like if you write a book, regardless of the genre, regardless if the love interest isn't the main part, like it feels like it has to be in there. And like absolutely there are some books that I've read where the love interest almost does feel forced, and you're like, I don't quite see why it was necessary in the book. I don't think that is forced in all situations. Like I do think there's certain authors who can write a book and the love interest feels so natural, like especially if it's the main part of the story. I think sometimes it can get a little bit awkward if it's not really explained or if it's rushed, like insta love. I do feel like that's definitely very awkward. Let me know your thoughts on that, because that'd be really interesting, because I know a lot of people have different like tolerances to there being romance in books, and some people just absolutely despise it. So I think this one's definitely down to like personal preference and what you enjoy most about a story. The next one is quite a long one, so I will have to look down to read it all. I don't know if it's unpopular, but I'm really sick of, and then it is got quotes. Teenage protagonists who think they know better than all of the experienced adults and end up messing up everything because they don't listen. I can't remember which book I thought this was about recently, but see Winx Saga on Netflix. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So I've not seen the Winx Saga. I do agree to a certain extent, and I think you do find this a lot in YA. If for instance you look at some things that happen in The Cruel Prince, Jude definitely does feel like she's the person who knows the most, and sometimes she doesn't listen to the people around her, especially the people who are like assassins with her, like the Ghost. You could argue the same for the Hunger Games. Definitely do agree to some extent, but I think that's sort of a trope in itself. It's definitely something that comes up an awful lot in YA. Can I hear Luna? She's just going through my bin now. Go on then, you can stay there while I read. The final one is, mine is love triangle in which guy 2 is invariably more interesting than guy 1, but guy 1 is going to win the battle for my heart anyway because he was introduced in the opening chapters, and true love or something. Ooh. The person goes on to say, one of my favourite things about the Hunger Games is that it dangles this trope so hard and then doesn't do it. And I am still mad about that happening in the Hunger Games. Like, Gale. Why would you choose Peter when you've got Gale? I'll just let you sit on that for a second. Peter, Gale. Like, I gotta be honest, I've not read Catching Fire or Mockingjay. I've only read The Hunger Games, as the majority of other people did. Of course I watched the films, and I understand this so much. Like, I didn't love the fact, spoilers, that she went with Peter in the end, but like I just thought like Gale was definitely the person who she should have gone for. So I can understand what this means, but the majority of the time in love triangles, usually the person that the character chooses is the one that I prefer. This is definitely interesting because I've never like thought about this before, but it's definitely true. You've always got that one who the main character is lusting after, and then there's the other one who you know that she's gonna pick, or you know that she should pick. Interesting. I feel like this video has brought out my kind of opinionated side. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on all of these. I'd love to know. I think it'd be a really interesting discussion because a lot of people are quite opinionated about things like this. This is only a little bit of fun. I just thought it'd be quite funny to see what other people think about books and their unpopular opinions. Let me know what your either what your embarrassing confession is in the comments or your biggest unpopular bookish opinion. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a little bit different. I will see you in the next video. Bye!